We're recapping the first week of New York Giants training camp, and we're also going to take a look at the upcoming first week of padded practices at Giants training camp. Ed Valentine of Big Blue View joins us. That's coming up next on the LockedOn Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I am Patricia Trena, and I am joined today by Ed Valentine of Big Blue View. We're going to talk Giants training camp. The Giants have their acclimation period in the books. Pads start on Monday, August 1st, which is when a lot of you will probably be hearing this podcast. And basically, we're going to talk about some early impressions. And, again, the disclaimer here is that the team has not been in pads yet. So there's only so much we can tell, but some things certainly came out in watching the practices. And Ed, a lot of stuff to talk about, certainly in these first few days of training camp.
Obviously, Patty, and thank you for having me on again. I know we did a show last week as well. One thing that I have to say, and I know Brian Daboll was sort of pointing this at the media when he said it the other day, but he said something to the effect of, let's not be, such quick evaluators or something along that line. I can't remember the exact quote. And I know darn well that was pointed at the media after 3 or 4 days of practices, in shorts and t-shirts with no real hitting. But Patty, what's the fun of that? What's the fun of that? Isn't that our job? It's our job to create the discussion. We're allowed to do that stuff. He's not. We are. So
there are certain things. Yeah, there are certain things you can tell.
He's not. It's his job. It's his neck on the line. But it's our job to, it's our job to jump to conclusions and be silly and make dumb predictions and all of that. So let's do it.
Oh, this is going to be a great show, folks. You can tell Ed is already on a roll, and we haven't even got started yet. All right, Ed, let's since you're like all fired up to make some evaluations and be an evaluator this early, let's start with the practices themselves with Daboll and the biggest difference. Now, when I look at these practices, I see there is a common theme, that they're going to work on, whether it be red zone, whether it be third and short, third and long, third and forever, whatever. And I just see that instead of jumping all over the place, that there is more focus on what the topic du jour is. And as such, the way the practices are structured, like I made the comment to one of our colleagues the other day, I said, we're not seeing a lot of practices where there are like 15, 16, 18 periods. We're seeing fewer periods, longer sessions though. What have your thoughts been on how Daboll has structured practices so far?
I've thought, Patty, that it's been very interesting. You and I talked about it a little bit the other day before you went and asked Daboll about it and got all the credit for being so smart and so observant. You and I had talked about this the other day about how he's structuring practices and working on certain situations on certain days, and how it made so much sense in shorts and t-shirts the first couple of days to work on red zone, on short yardage, on limited areas of the field when maybe you don't want guys, running 40 or 50 yard sprints all the time. But I've been impressed by the plan so far. I've also been impressed by you watch some of the drills and you watch certain things, like a lot of the special teams periods are easy to just sort of blow off and chit chat, and we all do some of that. But if you watch some of the drills, it's not an offensive drill or it's not a defensive drill, and it's not, a kick return drill. It's both sides. And I've gotten, I've enjoyed watching that because you're working both aspects of the play. And I've been impressed so far. Obviously, we'll see how things go, but I have been impressed. I've been happy with, with seeing the pace of practices and the way that they've been structured so far.
Yeah, and just to your point about the special teams drills, rather than have like, a punt return or a kickoff return, they're working on various segments of the respective games, So like, for example, we saw drills where it was hands up, get your hands up to try and block the kick or beating the gunners down the field or whatever the case may be.
And what we've seen in those, when I coach youth basketball and when I coach kids, you almost call them stations. Mm-hmm. And what we've seen in those stations is that those stations aren't designed to work, punt return. They're working punt return and punt cover, or kick return and kick cover at the same time. And to and that to me is a good use of time. It's a good use of the limited, practice time that you have.
Definitely. And another thing I like about what I've seen so far from Dable is the whole approach to dealing with the players who are coming off of injuries. Now, not a lot of guys are in the red medical jerseys. Basically, you have the 3 on PUP. You have Ojulari, who is, on NFI. But there are still guys that are working their way back from off-season issues or season-ending injuries and whatnot that are not quite 100% yet, but they're gradually coming up. And what I like about what Dable has done is he's not putting those guys on the shelf and saying, "Oh, okay, we're going to hold you out until we actually need you because, it's still early." Let them do what they can. Mm-hmm. And what they can't do, then hold them out. So we saw that with Blake Martinez. Martinez, the first practice, didn't do the team drills. Then the second practice, he did some team drills. And then in the third practice, even though they were working more with the dime package, they cut him back a little bit. So I kind of like the approach that they have taken with these guys because they're not letting them sit and grow mold, so to speak, on the shelf.
And Kadarius Toney's been the same way. I mean, mm-hmm. Toney was really good the first 3 days of practice and got a lot of work in the first 3 days. And then on the fourth day, I don't think either you and I were both not there on Saturday, but what we heard was, Toney did the individual part. He did the early stuff. He just didn't do the team periods. And that's okay. I'd rather have guys do portions than ride the bike the whole day.
Yeah.
Do what you can, catch a few balls, run a few routes, do hit the sled if you're an offensive lineman and you're not going to practice during the team periods. Do what you can, because then at least when you are able to get back out there, there's not so much rust to knock off. You're not so far behind in your conditioning, and running those routes and doing those things just isn't so foreign.
Yeah. And that's key. We saw that last year with guys that were put on the shelf, and by the time they came back, they were rusty as all heck.
Oh,
Kenny Galladay comes to mind.
If I can say this, Patty, and it's off the track a little bit of what we're talking about, but since I mentioned Kadarius Toney, I got an email the other day about something I had written about Kadarius Toney, and the guy was like, "Oh, don't put him in the Hall of Fame yet." And the reality of it is, no one's trying to do that. And I think you'll recognize this as well, Patty. He's had 3 good days of practice in training camp. Mm-hmm. And you know what that is, Patty? That's 3 good days of practice. That's 3 more good days of practice than he had in training camp a year ago.
Yes.
And that doesn't mean he's going to have a great year, but that's 3 more good days of practice than he had all of last year leading up to the season.
And that was something, and that was something I wrote on Giants Country, actually, that, everything that could have gone wrong for him last year did. Mm-hmm. So far, other than, the offseason knee surgery, which knocked him out of the spring, mm-hmm. he's been coming along. You could see he's happier. He's looser. Mm-hmm. He spoke to the media on, I think it was Friday. Mm-hmm. I've never seen him that relax with
No.
even with some of the the grilled questions that he got about where was he and stuff that maybe
Patty, Kadarius Toney he's different than you and I. He's different than anybody in the media. He comes, he comes from a different place, and sometimes I'm not sure he's 100% certain what he's being asked or how to answer it. But he didn't mumble the other day. As you said, he was happy.
Mm-hmm.
He tried to answer the questions the best he could, but he seems happy. He seems relaxed. You see him walking around the practice field with a smile on his face,
Mm-hmm.
And even the fans are giving him encouragement, and that's all positive. That's all good for him so far.
And how about Brian Dable working in some of Kadarius Toney's music into the practice set list, which it's a minor thing. It's probably something like who cares, who even notices, but trust me, they notice.
Oh, and you could tell when we talked to Kadarius the other day, you could tell that he was appreciative of that.
Mm-hmm.
He's just appreciative of guys trying to reach out to him. I mean, we don't have any idea what the relationship was behind the scenes between Kadarius Toney and Joe Judge and Jason Garrett and all of that. All we can do is go by what we see. And what we see is Kadarius Toney on the field with a smile on his face, and Kadarius Toney making plays so far.
All right, Giant fans, still more to come on today's Locked On Giants podcast. But first, if you're living paycheck to paycheck or struggling to make ends meet, it can really be stressful when unexpected expenses come up. Well, now Dave can help you get out of a pinch when you really need it. Dave is the banking app that can help you get up to $500 instantly with no interest and no credit check needed. Millions of people have already downloaded the Dave app to get the financial relief that they need. Visit the App Store today and download Dave. That's DAVE. Sign up for an extra cash account and get up to $500 instantly. Future you will thank you. Terms and conditions apply and instant transfer fees apply. Visit dave.com/legal for complete information. Banking provided by Evolve, member FDIC. All right, Ed, let's talk now about what we have seen now. Again, no pads, so you can only tell so much. But there have been a few guys that have stood out. We mentioned Kadarius Toney. He's been one that has stood out. A guy that I think has been, a pleasant surprise, and you and I talked about this a little bit on the sideline as well, Richie James, the receiver who was also a return specialist. I mean, he's making a serious push for the roster. We talked about the situation with Darius Slayton and how Slayton, with the salary, and plus he doesn't play special teams, and he's also had a shaky start to camp so far. I mean, right now, if you had to make a decision, I think it would be a no-brainer as to what direction you would go. Absolutely,
Patty. And Richie James, and I hope Richie listens to your show, Patty, because he's been ducking me. He's been ducking me. He ducked me in the spring when I asked to talk to him, and he ducked me again the other day. He's ducking me. This has got to stop.
Richie, if you're listening, stop ducking, Ed.
Don't duck me, dude. I'm harmless.
Well, I don't know about that.
Well, unless I'm picking on Patty, but generally I'm harmless. But
yeah, well, that's why he's ducking you.
Yeah, there you go. But
see,
Richie James, I said to somebody the other day, the same thing that I said in the spring. The ball just keeps finding the guy, whether he's working with the first unit or whether he's working with the second unit. The ball just keeps finding the guy. And, Brian Dable gave us a little bit of coach speak the other day, because we see what the first unit is and the second unit is and the third unit is for the most part. And he'll give us the coach speak that doesn't really matter, because there's a rep chart, there's no depth chart. But you know what? There's only a limited number of practices. There's only a limited number of reps. They're not going to waste first team reps on guys who don't have shots to make the roster. And the two wide receivers who have gotten the most first team reps when, when they've pulled Kadarius Toney back, or when they've pulled Kenny Golladay back a little bit, are Richie James and CJ Board. And that tells you something.
Special teams guys, by the way.
Absolutely. And that tells you something, that they want those guys to get reps with Daniel Jones, that, they want those guys to get looks with, with the first group. So to me, like I said, those things, the coaches will tell you they don't matter, but they have to matter.
Sure. At some point you have to do the evaluation. And again,
Right.
I know you can't really do a full evaluation in pads, but you can pretty much tell who's picking up, the assignments and learning in the classroom and who isn't. And
you can do more wide receiver evaluation sometimes
Sure.
without pads than you can do, the interior line play.
Yeah, absolutely. And, again, special teams is going to be a big factor for the receivers. All right, let's talk a little bit about, I don't know if you want to call this a surprise. I kind of suspected it was going to happen, but still I think a lot of people thought it was like, wow, and that is Xavier McKinney is now basically the quarterback of the defense, a role that in the past has gone to an inside linebacker. Blake Martinez did it for, the 2020 season and part of the 2021 season before his injury. Then Tate Crowder took it over. That to me was very telling for a couple of reasons. Number one, McKinney is a guy that I don't think is going to come off the field very often in this defense, number one, which is a big reason why he probably got that green dot. But it also signifies a shift in the philosophy, is, I think, regarding how they're going to deploy the inside linebackers and the defensive backs. I think you're going to see more nickel, more dime packages. Just a gut feeling I have. What were your thoughts when you learned that McKinney had actually been given an opportunity to call some of the plays in the defensive huddle?
Well, Patty, it's funny because I had thought back in the spring, you do the 90-man roster profiles of each player on the roster during the spring, as do I. And I was looking at Xavier McKinney and thinking, sooner or later, this is going to be Xavier McKinney's defense. Right now, everybody considers Leonard Williams to be the best player on this defense. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't be shocked at all if by the middle or the end of the season, if everybody looks at Xavier McKinney and says, he's the man on this defense. He's the guy. And it makes so much sense to put that defense in his hands, to make him the signal caller. You look at Blake Martinez. To me, this is Blake's not on the field every snap right now because he's working his way back from the knee injury. This is a shift in how the defense is going to be played. McKinney's going to be on the field every snap, like you said. There's going to be a rotation at linebacker. Blake Martinez is not going to play every snap. Tate Crowder is not going to play every snap. We've seen a whole lot of defenses throughout the first 4 days with 6 defensive backs. Yeah. We've seen an awful lot of that. 1 linebacker on the field, 6 defensive backs. And I think we're going to continue to see a lot of that from Wink Martindale in certain situations. But yeah, it's very, very clear that the Giants are making this Xavier McKinney's defense. And I did think, just as a quick aside, we talked a little bit about practice structure. I thought that it was very cool that Brian Daboll has allowed he's allowed Daniel Jones and he's allowed Xavier McKinney to call plays in certain situations. Sitting there the other day watching practice on Friday, and I have never seen a third string quarterback be allowed to start at his own 25-yard line and run a 14-play drive. Davis Webb ran a 14-play drive, and neither Brian Daboll nor Mike Kafka, the offensive coordinator, were wearing headsets. I think Davis Webb called every play on that series.
And, that's important for a couple of reasons. Number one, as Daboll said, what happens if the radio communication cuts out? You want these guys to be able to call the plays. But a bigger reason why it's so important, I think, is it promotes a sense of ownership It's like, guys, this is our offense. It's not what I say, Brian Dable, or what Mike Kafka says. It's our offense. We all are going to have a say in this, and win it. We're going to win together, or we're going to lose together. But it's not going to be, one man's offense or two men's offense. And I thought that was a very big and subtle yet powerful message that Dable sent to the players.
Absolutely. It's about trust. It's about building a relationship that goes both ways.
All right. And I know a lot of people want to know about the offensive line. And again, without pads, we really can't, judge. So we're not going to dive too deep into the offensive line. That being said, one thing we can talk about, and you and I talked about this, and is the center position and how, there were some bad snaps with John Feliciano sidelined. He's dealing with a heat related issue from Thursday, which was just absolutely brutal, by the way. The backup center's position. I mean, the Giants don't have a true center on the team. They're all guard converts. They are all guys who are not signed beyond this year. I think, if you want to make the case that Shane Lemieux, who took some snaps on Saturday at center, he's signed beyond this year, but basically they don't have a long-term answer at center on this roster right now. Is that a concern to you?
It is, Patty. It is, because we don't know, everybody is rooting like crazy for Nick Gates to make it back. And whether the Giants wanted to play him at guard if he comes back, whether they want to play him at center if he comes back. I don't think we should even really have that discussion until we see the man practice.
Yeah.
And we may not even see that until next year. We just don't know. But as far as the guys on this roster right now, Ben Bredesen, to my knowledge, has never played center. The Giants have been working him at center since the spring, and it's been an adventure.
Mm-hmm.
Jamil Douglas and Max Garcia have both played a little bit of center in their careers. Those are veteran sort of journeyman guys. Played a little bit of center, but when they've had to play it, it hasn't been pretty. The fact that Brian Dable, and again, you and I were not there on Saturday, but I am assuming out of frustration after watching what happened on Friday and watching what started to happen again on Saturday, the fact that he turned to Shane Lemieux with the first unit to run the center position and put Josh Azudu in at left guard, my immediate thought was, I wonder if there might be something long-term in that alignment. I just wondered if there might be an indication that could be, a long-term solution. Because remember, when the Giants drafted Lemieux, and I know it was Dave Gettleman and Joe Judge, the center position is something that was talked about and worked on initially with Lemieux. So it made me wonder if there might be a back burner plan to maybe go that way in the long term.
And Lemieux did start to train at center, even though he primarily played, left guard at Oregon. So, it wouldn't be a stretch, but I don't know. But man, I want to see them just get a guy who's done it in college and done it at a decent enough level and stop, taking a
short term, Patty, it wouldn't shock me at all as they go through all of this with Max Garcia and Jamil Douglas and Bredesen. It wouldn't shock me at all if, when roster cuts are made, later in the summer, that an experienced veteran, true backup center shows up on this roster.
Yeah, I think they need to.
You can't. The most elementary part of the center position is getting the ball to the quarterback.
Right.
And if you can't get the ball to the quarterback in a walkthrough when there's no defense and you're working without your helmets on, which Ben Bredesen snapped the ball over Daniel Jones's head in a helmetless walkthrough the other day. If you can't do that, you can't play center in the NFL.
Yeah, you can't take that chance. It was only a handful of bad snaps we've seen, but one bad snap is one bad snap too many, in my opinion. All right, Giant fans, we have more coming up for you on today's LockedOn Giants podcast. But first, BetOnline.net is the only place that offers the best information on the latest odds, contests, and player props for all your sports betting needs. No matter what sport you're into, BetOnline.net has you covered. Plus, they offer everything you need to know for live betting and your favorite Vegas casino games. So head on over to BetOnline.net today to learn more about the trends and the action. BetOnline, where the games start. Let's talk about Daniel Jones, because that's another hot topic. Again, we watched the practices, no pads, no contact. So it puts the offensive line at a bit of a disadvantage because they really can't stop, the defense from barreling in and getting pressure. But how has Daniel Jones looked to you so far? And again, it's early, I know, but how's he looked to you?
Patty, I think the best way to put it for me is up and down. Up and down. I mean, he's made some good throws. He seems to think Darnay Holmes plays offense, but he's made some good throws. Sometimes I think that he thinks there's imaginary receivers out there somewhere, because sometimes the ball goes where there's nobody. But it's been up and down, and I don't want to make a judgment. I don't want to be one of those overly quick evaluators, because you're dealing with a new offense. You're dealing with guys like Kadarius Toney and Kenny Golladay who didn't take any reps in the spring. So you're dealing with things that everyone is just learning. But it's got to get better than what we've seen in the first 4 days. It's got to, I wrote the other day that it's just not crisp. There's too much hesitation. I don't care what the completion numbers are. I don't care if he's 15 for 22 or 17 for 23 or whatever, because those are all unofficial. And a lot of them are thrown, long after he probably should have scrambled or thrown a ball away or whatever, under normal situations where he could get hit. But the ball's got to come out quicker. There's got to be a little bit. There's got to be some quicker decisions made, and the ball's got to be on target a little bit more than it's been so far. I mean, there have been some beautiful throws, beautiful crossing route that he threw on Friday to Kenny Golladay. A couple nice sideline balls that he's thrown. And what I'm going to be watching with Jones and the passing attack in general is, does it get crisper between now and week 1? Because right now, everybody loves the motion and everybody loves all the different things that the Giants are doing, and mixing and matching and using Saquon Barkley out wide, with Wan'Dale Robinson in the backfield sometimes, and the different formations that they're using and all of that. But it's complicated. It's got options in it, and these guys have to learn to see it the same way. And I think some of that it's a work in progress right now, and it's not crisp. So you just want to see it get crisper and cleaner before the season starts.
Sure. And certainly with the passing game, it could be, this reminds me of the old Kevin Gilbride offense, where the receivers had multiple options to do, based on what the defense was showing them. So, it's hard to right now to say that a misfired ball was Daniel's fault or the receiver's fault. It's hard, but you're right. The passing game does need to get a little crisper. All right. Final question for you, Ed. And this is kind of to look ahead at the week coming up. We're going to have the team in pads, I believe, 3 days. The Fan Fest is coming up on Friday. What are you looking for this week as the Giants get into, the run? They're probably going to do more with the running game. What are some of the things you're going to be looking for once they get into pads?
Well, Patty, I think that we begin to see and we begin to get a better idea of the offensive line play, obviously. It's very difficult sometimes when these guys aren't in pads to tell what's a true pass rush and what isn't a true pass rush, because the blockers, for example, they're not going to be nearly as physical with these guys as they might be, if they're in full pads. So for me, every time I'm there this week, the focus has got to be on those interior guys. Does the offensive line hold up? Is there communication in the middle? Obviously, it's always fun to watch Evan Neal versus, Kayvon Thibodeau or Thibodeau versus Andrew Thomas. Those things are always fun, but I'm going to be interested in watching just how this offensive line handles the stuff that Wink Martindale's going to throw at him, because, you watch a couple videos of Wink Martindale, and there have been a couple videos of him just running meetings, with defensive players and all that. And Wink Martindale is approaching these practices like it's a Sunday and it's a game day.
Yeah.
He's throwing the kitchen sink out there every day, and he wants to go get it.
Yeah.
And he wants his defense to go get it. And darn well he's going to do that in these padded practices. And it's going to be interesting to see, with John Feliciano playing center full time for the first time, it's going to be interesting to see if especially the middle of that offensive line is able to hold up.
Yeah, that's a big one, because that was a problem last year. And what I'm also curious to see with that offensive line, I'm sure we're going to start to see more stunts and twists and all that stuff. And that has always been a problem with this offensive line for the last couple of years. How well are they going to pick up that stuff, as well as, the run blocking, which, at times, let's face it, it hasn't always been as crisp as you like to see it. So that is definitely a big storyline. And anything else that you're going to be looking for this week when they get into pads?
Well, I would like to see Daniel Jones get through a day without throwing a ball to Darnay Holmes.
He did on Saturday, although Holmes forced a fumble. So
I guess so. But mostly, Patty, it's that interior back and forth that's the focus this week. I'm going to be paying more attention this week than I did week one to the defensive alignments, to who's on the field, and maybe not necessarily to even, which players are on the field, but what's the alignment? How many defensive linemen are on the field?
Right.
How many linebackers are on the field? How many defensive backs are they using a majority of the time? Because those things will tell us what the defense is going to look like when we get to week one.
And it's been creative so far, for sure. We talked about the offense being creative looking, but the defense for sure.
Creative is a great word, Patty. I was just going to say, these are not
your grandfather's
these
Giants.
Are not your grandfather's Giants, most definitely.
You're stealing my line, dude.
Well, I was going to say Bill Parcells Giants or Joe Judge or the Joe Judge, Jason Garrett Giants, but
the Fighting Joe Judges, right?
Oh, geez. Well, they did have a fight on Saturday. Although they didn't have to run a gazillion 100-yard sprints and listen to an epithet-filled tirade the whole time.
Yes, very true. I mean, Dable's very different in his approach than Joe Judge. We'll see in time if it pays off, obviously, but so far I think so good. So, all right. Edward, as always, appreciate you dropping by on the podcast. Giant fans, make sure you check him out on Big Blue View. I'm also going to be on his show if you want to check out his podcast. So I will be on that show. He's already planning. I could see it in his face. He's already planning. How am I going to wrangle Patty? You're so obvious.
Patty. There's always evil thoughts in this.
See it in your face. I know.
There's always evil thoughts going on.
I know you too long. All right, Giant fans, thank you so much for tuning in to the LockedOn Giants podcast, making us your first listen of the day, or watching on YouTube your first watch of the day. Don't forget to keep it here all week long. We will have practice wrap-ups. I'll try and get them out to you the same day as I did last week. We'll have bonus shows as need be. Fan Fest is coming up at the end of the week, so a lot of ground to cover here in the land of the Giants. Check us out again, LockedOn Giants podcast, wherever you get your podcasts, and also check out Giants Country, where I do all my written work. For Ed Valentine, I'm Patricia Traina. Giant fans, we will talk to you tomorrow.